the grief that had taken me inward and made me realize what is this trap that I'm stuck in. I'm just being commodified and sexualized, and I'm not sure whether this is the path that really gives me joy. And I will never shy from saying this, but the first time I felt respected and valued on a film set was when I worked for VVC.
How's that?
And I'd worked with the biggest producers and some of the biggest, acting teams, actors, everything. I remember when I finally decided that I would make my separation public, how terrified I was. Because, I mean, the kind of judgment that comes with news like this is extraordinary. And everyone was terrified for me, my friends, my family, my agents. And I remember thinking to myself that you can handle this, you handled worse. We're shooting in Rajasthan with my character speaking Bhojpuri, and my lines are being given to me minutes before I have to go on set to shoot. My clothes are getting stitched on the fly and they're just like kind of arriving. So there's like no, acha kya pehnti hai? Chaniya choli. And I'm like, क्यों? तुम सवाल बड़े करती हो यार, तुम सवाल मत किया करो. When I started out as an actor, there was a lot of comparison with former beauty queens, especially Aishwarya Rai. You don't have to be light-eyed and light-skinned to be perceived as beautiful. You can be yourself entirely and still be beautiful.
Hello everybody, I'm Rudrani and welcome to Wonder Women. She is definitely a wonder woman. She's made her space, broken norms, broken stereotypes, and always been herself. I'm talking about the beautiful, beautiful inside out, Diya Mirza. Thank you for joining in.
You're the sweetest. Thank you
Also
for having
truthful.
me. Yes, you are.
I am. I have to say that. But you know, I keep harping on this fact that you've been authentic because the industry in the world that we're in doesn't really allow us and doesn't really celebrate authenticity all the time. You know, they're always trying to put particularly female actors in this box of their own.
A mold.
A mold. Even in the way they look, a certain type you have to look.
But that's society in general.
Yeah.
I guess it's even more so in our industry.
Yeah. But you've always, from the beginning, tried to fight against that tide. If I take you back to that lane, tell me how tough it was back then to do it comparatively.
So honestly, I think when I started out as an actor, there was a lot of comparison with former beauty queens, especially Aishwarya Rai. Of course, it was a huge compliment. I was young and starting out. I was all of 19, and I took it as a compliment and took it in my stride. Having said that, it was a very dangerous trend, and because what was happening was there was some kind of an expectation for me to be as refined as she was, or not even that. I think it was just a box that I was put in that kind of had to match a certain standard that they had set, right? Which was, of course, her infinite beauty. But I want to take away something important that I learned from that, which was you don't have to be light-eyed and light-skinned to be perceived as beautiful. You can be yourself entirely and still be beautiful. And I'll tell you why I mentioned the light eyes as well. Specifically because I remember in the first 3, maybe 4 years of my acting career, I was wearing light colored lenses in every film. I mean, so much so that in one film there would be like multiple lens changes. And it's a ridiculous thing because I think I was desperately trying to conform to some crazy idea of beauty, and also because I was not comfortable with who I was despite having won an international beauty title. So it's a little bizarre, that the dichotomy of that situation. And I think when I did a film, it was a very unique film. It was a film called Pran Jaye Par Shaan Na Jaye, that Sanjay Manjrekar had produced, and a wonderful director had directed us in it. And even in that film, where I am playing a character who is perceived as not beautiful by the society, I remember them darkening my skin for the part, the color of my eyes being brown as they are, and me having to wear, so when the transition happens, or her so-called transformation happens into the swan from the duckling, what was the transition? I see those shots today and I cringe, and I'm like, oh my god, this is just so wrong. I'm wearing these light grey lenses, and
Fairer.
yeah, the color of the skin has changed. So I think there's a lot there that was really messed up, and I don't think I had the maturity or the understanding to see how wrong any of that was at that time. It was only much later that I said, wait a minute, who am I again? What is my authentic voice? So can the first thing that I discard and never use again be a colored lens, unless the part genuinely demands it, and I'm not doing it to validate some form of beauty that somebody else has set a standard for. And I think that happened about 6 to 8 years into my career. So 25 years में से 8 साल, I think पहले 7-8 साल आप negate ही कर दो. It took that much time to just understand and be able to vocalize and stand by and or for something.
I was going back and reading up on you. I realized that a lot of people always talk about your beauty so much. It's ironical because they even criticized that beauty then. They said you were so beautiful, but then some people will come and tell you, oh, but if it was this much, then maybe it would have been even more. That's so ironical for me. Someone like you who's absolutely gorgeous, and I look beyond your physical beauty also, had to still face that criticism. Which, you know what? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we've laughed about how in my first film I was called all kinds of things.
Yeah, for the ones who don't know, maybe you should tell them. Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, you know, journalism and film journalism for the first decade of my career, maybe a little longer, was toxic. And there's no other way to describe it. It's still better now, and I feel like there is more than enough room and space to have conversations with decent people who, you know, have genuine interest in storytelling and cinema and your craft, and are not really only interested in creating clickbait material where they're like just, you know, painting you with a very bad brush, or they're using language that demeans you and disrespects you. But starting out, I mean, we would have like a regular onslaught on our dignity, on our appearance, on everything. And
a lot of slut shaming.
A lot of that. Body shaming, slut shaming, you name it. There's hundreds of things. I've just been spending a little time at home, and I was going through some archival articles and reading certain, you used to get those small snippets where this very toxic auntie would be telling people gossip, and the descriptions in those articles is horrifying.
So sad.
Yeah, but it existed and it thrived, and people devoured it.
Yeah,
encouraged it. So there's something wrong with everybody about letting something like that happen.
How did you deal with it when you were amidst that storm?
Oh,
I
was a
course you can
kid.
detach.
I was a kid.
Yeah, it must be so heartbreaking.
It was so hard to understand, to even kind of make sense of. I remember Bhatt Saab once, actually. I was shooting a film called Tumsa Nahi Dekha, and I was desperately unhappy about this regular onslaught on me in the media, and it was regularly like just linking me up with random people, or making snide, rude, disrespectful, demeaning remarks. And but I would say, I mean, with all due respect, it's the newspaper. It's, you know, people will read it today, tomorrow it will be somebody's toilet paper. And the only person this kind of stuff will stick with will be you, because you are the protagonist in the story in your head. So why don't you remove yourself from the protagonist's position and look at it from a third person's perspective? It's so evident that it's trash. It belongs in the trash. So don't let it upset you. You know your truth, and that's all that matters. And that kind of really stuck in my head. And I said, okay, this makes absolute sense. This is the only way I can be a duck and let that water just ride off my back and not allow this to, ruffle me.
Deep dive into a time when you started was during modeling and of course around the time your year was so monumental because all three of you were absolute queens in your own right, with or without the crown that you won for us. Three individual personalities, Lara, you, Priyanka. But also after that, what happened was just the pitting against each other, saying who is better than the other. In fact, I know that Lara and you were actually roommates, when you were struggling at the time to make them.
Yeah, we shared bye-bye noodles when
Right?
we had no money.
I need to know a little more on that for the ones who don't know. I just know a little, but maybe you can. And how do you look back at that conversation today? We are at a time when we know women are not buying that game of, being pitted against each other, but it still goes on at some level.
Oh, at every level, right? That's another thing that patriarchy thrives on.
Yeah.
No, I think it was just another byproduct of what sells, write the news that sells and create the noise that kind of gets heard. So my film journey started a little before Priyanka's and Lara's because I dived right into it. They gave themselves a little time. And by the time they came together in Andaz, which was a massive hit, and I had like 3 back-to-back flops between Rehna Hai Tere Dil Mein, Deewanapan and Tumko Na Bhul Payenge, which were touted as really big films but just didn't work at the box office. It was hard because naturally there was a lot of comparison. But Rudrani, I think 5-6 years into our careers, we kind of, each of us found our own, space. And I'm sure there were those who wanted to compare, continued to compare for a very, very long time, until we reached a point where our individual voices became so distinct and so strong that the comparisons had to stop. And that's wonderful because I think, to look back at a time where we all had this shared, unique, incredible experience from coming from, different cities in the country, learning to navigate, living on our own in Mumbai. Priyanka still had some support from her parents, but Lara and I didn't. And we were kind of, she was already living here because she was modeling. And she had opened her home and her heart to me. And I, shared an apartment the size of a matchbox with her. And I remember helping her pack for her Miss Universe and going away. And there's so much fondness and so much love and so much respect that I don't think any of us ever used any of that to take away from how we felt for each other. Priyanka was just doing extraordinarily well, almost from get-go. So she had other battles to fight and deal with. And she continued to, and some of those just intensified with time. But she was doing really well. And so one only had awe and respect for that, You kind of looked at it and said, what incredible confidence. I remember thinking to myself, my God, if I was half the actor she is, how much further I would be able to go. So I spent more time honing my skills, understanding what my drawbacks were, understanding how I could be a better artist. It kind of worked both ways.
You mentioned
it inspired some solid work.
No, of course.
To say the least.
No, of course. You said Lara and you shared bye-bye noodles. I'm sorry, but sometimes when you go back to those moments where
पैसे नहीं थे यार.
Yeah, वही मैं कह रही हूँ. It also shapes you as a human being. Yeah, the value for money, the value to become more independent, all of that.
Absolutely.
Do you agree?
There is nothing more empowering than financial independence for a woman, and and we were all starting out. We had some reserves in our bank, which we kind of had saved up. Lara and I had modeled and saved up that money. Neither of us used any money from our parents to do anything, not for our portfolios, not for the time that we spent training for the Femina Miss India, for none of it. And I know these details because we shared space. I know that even in Priyanka's, situation, it's not like she was coming from, she had solid support and her parents were very involved, especially her brother and her mother were very involved. But with us, there was just, we had what we had earned and what we had saved. And there'd be days when our savings would run out and payments would be due and they wouldn't come, and we'd be sitting in these expensive gowns and coming back from like these really fancy events where we'd posed with like the most expensive champagne, like Dom Perignon bottles. Again, I'm naming a brand I shouldn't be, but just posing with these really expensive bottles of champagne and coming back home to having to choose why because that's all we could afford.